And we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to the Google Marketing Platform Academy. Today we will cover the topic of DV360 for peaks. But why do we talk about peaks? Well, last year, running up to the holidays, retail had its biggest peak season ever and is anticipated to continue growing in 2021. So that's, of course, a great opportunity for you as a retailer or for your clients if you're an agency to get a share of that sales. So therefore, let's have a look together at the best practices of how to drive sales during those peak seasons. Before we dive right into the content, let me introduce us speakers, as I'm not by myself today. I'm joined by two lovely colleagues of mine. My name is Antje, and I'm joined today by Geraldine, who will be presenting with me on that session. And we are joined later on by Veronica as well, who will help out with her expert advice on some of the questions she handed in already and the live questions as well. We are all from the same team. We are all display and programmatic specialists. So we consult our partners and our agencies on campaign management and media activation. So hopefully we can give you some good best practices today. Then let's have a look at the agenda. So for the next probably 45 to 50 minutes, we will start by looking ahead to the peak season of 2021 and give you some statistics, some numbers on that, and then we jump right into the best practice part on how to adjust your bids and budgets, expand audiences across holiday shoppers, and how to diversify formats and creatives. And we finally wrap it up with a generic best practices for the peak and key takeaways. So let's get started and have a look at retail peak in numbers. Salesforce, the global leader in CRM, is publishing a holiday shopping report every year, and they share some trends, some data, and some highlights of the last year's holiday season and give an outlook to the next holiday season as well. They discovered that last year, retail had its biggest peak season ever, with global digital sales growing by 50% to 1.1 trillion US dollars. So that's a big opportunity for many retailers. They also saw in Q4 that retail searches grew at a rate over 3 times higher than the same time last year. That doesn't only show us that consumers are more buying online, but they're also more researching online and probably buying in stores later as well. And for 2021, they predict the EMEA holiday retail peak is anticipated to continue growing, with e-commerce alone forecast to rise 11.3%. So there's another great opportunity this year with that forecast again to take part in that sales season. Let's have a look at what we actually mean by peak. Many people probably think that's mainly the days leading up to Christmas. However, there are a couple of shopping events taking place before that Christmas period that might be interesting and that we consider peaks as well. It is kicked off by a Singles Day on November 11th. It originates in China, but it already moved on outside of China and is considered one of the biggest and largest shopping events globally. For instance, also MediaMarkt, which is a German retailer, is promoting Singles Day every year in their stores as well. And I've just seen on their website that they already started the countdown for Singles Day. So it's definitely also taking place in other countries too. Just right 2 weeks after, we have the biggest shopping event in the EMEA markets, which is the Cyber Week, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday, which is a well-established day with our consumers, even though it's more a US-based holiday. But consumers are well aware of the promotions and deals going on with many retailers and are expecting those deals and promotions as well. And then, of course, we have the pre-holiday season, which usually kicks off mid-December with demand rising for gifts. And that period will lead up towards the Christmas days as well. Interestingly, in that Salesforce report, Salesforce also said that digital sales grew 58% during the 5 days leading up to Christmas last year alone. So lots of last-minute shoppers that are still like roaming out looking for the last-minute gifts. And now we have seen that there are a couple of peak events, sales events taking place before Christmas. However, we also recommend to not see them as isolated events. Rather see them as more like concentrated sales periods. As you can see here very nicely in the graph, demand is not peaking just on those days, but it's increasing step by step and leading towards each of those single peaks. So that's a great opportunity here to think more of a always on approach during that 2 to 3 months before the Christmas season. We can also see that demand is increasing much earlier than Singles Day. Here we were in the beginning or mid-November, and it's starting most likely already in October. A good indicator for that is Black Friday. Black Friday is anticipated to start in October already, with demand rising, and that period for Black Friday spans over actually 10 weeks far into December, where people are looking for gifts. So that's, as I said, a great opportunity to think always on and connect those dots, maybe with remarketing, for instance. Then let's wrap it up. What are the key learnings from the 2020 holiday season? First of all, we saw that e-commerce led the way with 50% of growth, so we have to be digital. Second, shopping started early, as we've seen just in the previous slide. Another figure for that is the pre-Cyber Week saw the greatest YouTube year-over-year revenue growth last year. So people started looking for holiday gifts, Christmas gifts already far earlier than those Black Friday events, with demand rising at 83%. And then the pre-Christmas season and the Christmas season itself saw big peak in year-over-year revenue growth, meaning sales. And then one figure we haven't talked specifically about, but we would like to underline as well, that a lot of that research, a lot of that shopping takes place mobile as well. 54% of Black Friday digital orders were done on mobile devices. So that's not impressions or clicks, it's actual orders that went through mobile devices. So we have to think mobile first here, definitely. So how can we prepare for that peak season? First, we will have a look at how to adjust your bids and budgets to the seasonal increase. That will be still presented by me. And then I will hand over to Geraldine, who will guide us through the best practices for how to expand audiences across holiday shoppers and how to diversify your formats and creatives to make sure that you're reaching your customers. So let's have a look at bids and budgets. This holiday, it's expected again that people will be shopping both online and offline, and often their preferences are constantly changing. So bidding manually is nearly impossible at those events. Auto bidding is definitely a feature we have to rely on when we are having promotion events to make sure that we bid to every incoming bid request. The machine learning algorithm is trained on advertiser level, so we have a lot of knowledge already gathered there. If you have campaigns constantly running, and the algorithm uses over 50 signals to dynamically place bids on impressions. Of course, there are a couple of standard bidding strategies that we always recommend. The best practice here is to always look to align your goals to your bidding strategy, starting from the top with awareness, optimizing more towards views, meaning more impressions. In the mid-funnel, we have opportunities to optimize towards quality views or clicks, for instance. And then in the end, probably the most important one for us is optimizing towards conversions or app installs if you want to. Auto bidding also works, can work for seasonal peaks and short-term flights. As I mentioned already, we have the kind of learnings gathered on the advertiser level, and then depending on the volume of conversions, how much data we collect, of course the algorithm needs between a few days to a few weeks to learn. However, we've seen with a peak that a lot of volume, a lot of traffic will come our way. So you can expect that this learning curve will be enhanced and the algorithm can catch up quickly. One consideration specifically for those peak seasons or peak campaigns is to consider bidding on IO level if you have line items all running on open auction and all having a very similar goal. This way we can make sure that we collect more data at a quicker pace, and this will increase our performance much quicker as well. Great. And besides the standard bidding options, we would also like to point out two rather new bidding strategies that might be overlooked. The first one is outcome-based buying, where you, of course, as the name suggests, pay for outcomes while optimizing towards conversions. Here, the best option, particularly in the lower funnel, is pay for clicks, where you optimize for click-through conversions. There's also the other option, if you're more awareness-oriented, to pay for viewable impressions while optimizing for viewable view-through conversions. And both are applicable to open auction campaigns and for mainly display formats. However, of course, the pay for viewable impressions you can use for video formats too. And this bidding algorithm makes sure, or the strategy makes sure, that you increase your overall performance. Another option is custom bidding, also very new and just recently launched, where you optimize for unique KPIs. That means you write a script with these goals you have based on either transaction ROAS, weighted conversions, customer floodlight variables, or brands. And that script you can apply to open auction, private auction, and preferred deals. However, this bidding strategy requires a lot, like a large amount of data. I think we talk about like 1,000 conversions here. So really a high amount in order to learn and really optimize your bids. Therefore, we wouldn't definitely not suggested for like really short-term flights that you just run for a week or two, but this might be a good option for your more always-on campaigns, because they will probably capture a lot of the volume you are gathering as well. One other suggestion we want to point out with custom bidding is definitely testing. So if you haven't tried custom bidding before, just using or applying it for the peak season isn't recommended. However, it's just at the beginning of September yet. There's still probably 4 to 5 weeks where you can try custom bidding and run a A/B test for that in order to try out if that could be a good option for you. Then moving on to best practices. Here I want to share two things. The first one is to adjust performance targets for seasonality. You have seen that volume, meaning traffic, will increase during those peak periods, and they have to be captured, and that has to be outside of the normal settings we're using, because it's a larger volume. The second thing you have to keep in mind is also that your competition will be out there too. So what we usually see are higher bids, higher CPMs. To put that a little bit into perspective, we brought some numbers from last year. During the Black Friday and Cyber Monday weeks, we saw bids increasing to double the amount, so double the CPM that we usually see for open auction campaigns. And for desktop CPMs, we saw a rise of roughly 25%. So we have to keep in mind that competition is out there, and we probably have to bid higher. The strategy here, or the recommendation here, is to find out that fine line between capturing that volume on the one hand, you can see that here nicely in the graph, while lowering a little bit your efficiency, and on the other hand, being too efficient but not capturing enough. So finding that middle ground will be key for the peak season in general. We brought a couple of recommendations what you can do, so let's get through that. First, we recommend for new campaigns, or specifically campaigns that don't have enough data yet, to start with maximize conversions. That makes sure that we collect those conversion data first for the algorithm to learn, and then we can switch back to a more efficient driven bidding strategy. If you have enough data, we also recommend to use a favor goal instead of favor spend in order to keep that efficiency going with regards to your CPA. For newer campaigns, again, start with a target 2 times higher than your average in order to balance out the competition and make sure you are seen there next to your competition. And make sure you also remove your CPM caps, specifically for those line items, for those IOs that have a strong performance. During the sales period, it's definitely also recommended to have a constant look at your campaigns and see how the line items and insertion orders are developing. ROI is maybe a good KPI to look out for in order to make your next steps. If your ROI is positive, but you're underpacing, you're probably on that graph a little bit more on the left-hand side. So what you need to do is to increase your target CPA or your CPCs. And on the other hand, if your ROI is negative, but you're pacing well, we capture a lot of volume, and we are probably more on the left-hand side. Sorry, here. So what you have to do is lower the target CPC or the target CPA in order to be a bit more efficient. Hopefully this helps you with a peak. And then one final advice with regards to bids and budgets is do not let low budget get in the way of auto bidding during your seasonal events. And that can really constrain your performance, and your creatives will not be seen. So what can you do? Before the peak starts off, uncap your budgets, particularly for those line items and insertion orders that are usually performing really well. In the second step, when the peak starts kicking off, adjust your bids. As I just mentioned, we will expect higher bids, so you probably need to balance that out a little bit. Then in the third steps, also probably giving a little bit more budget. The best advice here is to look at your historic data. So what happened last year? Look at, for instance, your impression share and your click share and see if you missed any traffic. If you missed any traffic in that period, it's most likely that it will happen again. So this can give you an estimate how much more budget you need to plan ahead for that peak season coming up. And then during the peak season, as I mentioned before, have a look constantly at your campaigns in order to see how they are pacing, and shift budgets from bad performing line items to good performing line items. A good tool for this is the budget reallocation suggestion, which you can find directly in the user interface, and it tells you directly which line items are underpacing and how much budget is needed in order for it to pace normally. And with these advices, I hand over now to Geraldine, who will guide us through the best practices for audiences, creatives, and formats.
So thank you so much, Antje. So now I'm going to move on to the next section, and we're going to see together what are the different audience types, the different creative format and inventory that you can use ahead of peak season, but also during peak season, to make sure that you're making the most out of your media strategy in DV360. So firstly, what is super important to keep in mind is that you have solution in terms of targeting, creative, and inventory that matches all stage of the funnel. So you really want to make sure that you're adapting your strategy to your marketing objective, and that really matches the overall strategy that you want to apply. So firstly, we're going to deep dive a little bit into the audience sections. And the first things to keep in mind there is that you have Google Audiences signals that you can use for different stages of your funnel, from awareness to consideration and actions. So firstly, let's focus a little bit into the awareness part. So some of the audiences that you will be able to use, for instance, are live event audiences. Live event audiences are audiences that gather users that have just moved ahead in terms of the different stage of their life, and that might also reflect an intent to buy a certain type of product. Affinity audiences are audiences that gather users that have shown interest in specific categories and products. And custom affinity audiences are basically a little bit further customization of affinity audiences, because you can choose specific keywords, you can choose specific URLs and apps that matches your brand. In terms of moving down a little bit further in the funnel, you have consideration and action audiences that are represented by customer match, similar audiences. So both of them are powered by first-party data. You have in-market audience that represent shoppers and users that are actively looking for specific products and that are showing really powerful intent to buy a product. Finally, you have custom in-market audiences that represents your version of the in-market audiences with your keywords, URLs, and app. So if we dive a little bit into why you should adapt your audiences during holiday peak season, it's just because you really want to catch the user that are showing different behavior and are willing to buy during holiday season. The way you can capture this audience through Google Audiences is just adapting a little bit your category and including, for instance, in terms of affinity, gift shoppers, bargain hunters, wishlist creators. So you really want to include all those keywords of category that can bring up additional reach and also drive a little bit more awareness and consideration across your product. In terms of in-market category specific to holiday season, you can, for instance, think about adding Black Friday keywords, gift baskets, and a specific category that will be related to your brand and product. Finally, and as a best practices, definitely think about creating custom intent audiences that will really match the season. And by that, I mean you can include keywords that are related to holiday gift shoppers, Cyber Monday deals, very specific deal you're having on your website. But you can also include as well a specific URL of your website that are related to promotion, Black Friday, and specific deals, just to make the system aware that actually you're looking for extra reach of users that are browsing this type of websites. Promotion pages. If we're moving on a little bit into the audience strategy and going lower in the funnel, we definitely need to mention the first-party audiences. Why that's just because the first-party audiences are the golden mine of your audiences that represent users that already know your brands, are mostly already familiar with your type of product you're selling, but also probably have already demonstrated an intent to buy your product. So in terms of using the first-party audiences, there are 3 steps that we would recommend as the best practices to make sure that you're making the most out of it. The first one is the collection part. So the collection part already started hopefully before a holiday peak season, is that you're using either GMP, CRM, list with customer match. You're also using floodlight tags or website audiences just to make sure that you can collect as much user as possible that you will use after in your media strategy. Second step is analysis. So why is that important to analyze your first-party audiences? It's just that you can really use the analysis tool in DV360 to basically profile your first-party audiences and also get an incremental reach by finding categories of Google audiences that can show similarity with your first-party audiences, and then increase your reach and add an increment of conversion. So the audience analysis tool is available in the audience tab in DV360, and you just have to choose the right and the most intentional first-party audience that you want to use as a basis for this analysis. And finally, the activation part. So the activation part represents the part where you're actually including the first-party audiences in your setup. So it can be included either as an inclusion, so you want to target the first-party audiences. So it can be either, for example, users that have browsed on your website, added a few products to their baskets, and you want to retarget them during the peak season to make sure that they convert. And you can also exclude first-party audiences. Say, for instance, you want to exclude your customer that already have purchased maybe like less than 2 weeks before peak, so you don't want to retarget them again. And finally, you can extend your first-party audiences with auto-targeting. So auto-targeting is a feature available in line item section in DV360, and we're going to see that in the next slide. Finally, in terms of customization with first-party audiences, you have a very powerful way of adapting your messaging with data-driven creative and making sure that your first-party audiences, your existing customer has really the personalization they deserve during the peak season. So I mentioned a little bit the auto targeting feature in DV360. And why is that a feature that will be super helpful during the peak season? It's just because you want to find an incremental reach, and that can drive also incremental conversion. And the way this feature works is that it is using your already set up targeting in the line item, and it is expanding based on the slider that you're seeing on this slide. It is expanding your reach to find incremental users that are matching your existing targeting, and that can be interesting, potentially interested in the type of product you're selling. So moving on a little bit from the audience section into the creative part. So we wanted to give you a few recommendations ahead of peak to make sure that you're making the most out of your creative format and strategy. And why is that creative so important during peaks? Is that we know by now that 70% of the campaign performance comes on creative. So you really want to make sure that first you're having a data-driven approach. So we've seen, for example, data-driven creative that we're going to deep dive in the further slides. Also, you want to make sure that your creative are really immersive. You're engaging with your user, and you're standing out in front of competition that is much higher during the holiday season. Finally, the last recommendation is being present across different environment and experience, making sure that you're making the most out of all the different options available in DV360 to reach your potential customer. So deep diving a little bit into the data-driven part. Why is that so important? Is because you're getting a step further into the personalization, and we also have figures that demonstrate that 50% more conversion can be driven by having data-driven creative compared to standard HTML5 creative. So how simply working with data-driven creative in DV360? You can go into the creative section in DV360 and choosing the right creative, you can personalize it to make sure that you're creating different variants of creative and then creating dynamic rules that say, for example, we'll make sure that you can choose specific time, specific location, but also specific messaging for your users. So that is really a kind of a easy tool, easy way to go a little bit further into the personalization of your creative. We have been talking about engaging with your user with immersive formats, and you have different type of options available in the format gallery in DV360. You have, say, for instance, flipbook videos, parallax, or panorama that are kind of format that goes beyond a more classical formats, and that will enable you to go a bit further to really stand out. Because we know that during this period of time, user and customer are really in front of a lot of different ads. Potentially, also your competitors are trying to stand out there. So using kind of immersive format and interactive format will be a way for you to just stay top of mind of your user. And finally, being present across different experience and environment. What it means is that you have different type of environments that you can target, different type of format that you can use, and you really want to make sure that you can also have the opportunity to reach users across different and non-destructive way. So in here, you see few options that we are gonna develop in the next slides. You have, for example, Gmail ads, audio ads, native formats, but also YouTube environments with TrueView and bumpers, and also in-stream video. The goal there is really to remember that you have several options, and these options are opportunities for you to get incremental awareness, consideration, but also drive more sales across your customers. So we were talking about type of inventory, and we cannot talk about that without mentioning app inventory. Why that? Just because app inventory is the largest missed opportunity in programmatic. Basically, people spend 10 time more time on in-app versus mobile web. There is also a large opportunity to scale your strategy and get presence across these environments. And even more with the pandemic, people are spending more and more time in-app. They're actually being very involved in these environments. So make sure that you can be present in these environments. And one thing very important as well is that as app inventory is mainly present across a mobile device, it is also 30% to 40% more viewable than web. And the CPM price are also average 20% cheaper. So you really want to think about including that in your strategy to make sure that you're getting these increments, and also you have this additional presence for your customer. One of the type of creative formats that is mainly present in app is the audio creative. So audio creative is one of the emerging formats that you can use to drive additional awareness amongst your target audience, just because people are spending more and more time listening to audio content, and 30% of the time spent on mobile is actually audio listening. With that, you can get an incremental reach of about 58% beyond display and video alone. And also, you have the possibility to get audible formats mixed with your display and video content to drive an additional 3.8% brand awareness. Finally, one thing to really highlight there is that you can also run audio ads on YouTube. And it has been proof that it can drive an incremental lift in brand awareness of 70%, 75%. So one of the blockers that might present itself in terms of like running audio ads is having actually audio creative. For that, you have now a feature in DV360 that is called the audio mixer, that is available in the creative tab, and that you can use to create your own audio creative. That feature enables you to really personalize your audio assets. And going a step further, we have also the Audio Mixer Pro that is now in beta phase and that is going to be released pretty soon. That will enable you to also create dynamic roles with your audio formats. So if you're interested in having the Audio Mixer Pro, you can approach your account manager and see if you're eligible for this feature. Moving on in terms of the very impactful formats for brand awareness, you have the CPM masthead. So the CPM masthead is basically a format that will enable you to being displayed on the homepage of YouTube. So basically, it will be a way for you to drive incremental visibility and be present really and top of mind on your customer mind. CPM masthead as well. It's important to keep in mind that it is available through programmatic guarantee directly in the marketplace of DV360. Another type of formats that you can use during your peak seasons is connected TV. Why connected TV? Is that we've seen in the previous years that online videos are increasing. We are now plus 67% online video. We also, via DV360, have the access to the largest CTV publisher inventory, that is YouTube. And you definitely can think about adding CTV to mix your existing display and video strategy, and also make sure that you have a privacy safe environment, because CTV is now a totally brand safe environment, and you can also control your frequency management with CTV. So using YouTube plus display and video 360 can enable you to actually maximize your reach and reach a type of inventory that is also very new and you go straight into your shopper home and devices, and you have the liberty also to really showcase your brand with very immersive format. In terms of, so if we move a little bit down the funnel, in terms of driving actions, you probably already know TrueView for Action, but we are moving into the next generation of TrueView for Action in our YouTube environment with Video Action Campaign. So Video Action Campaign is basically making the most of machine learning and intelligence to make sure that you can reach users on YouTube across home feeds, different pages, in stream, and also GVP. We've seen that with Video Action Campaign, we can deliver 20% more conversion than with TrueView for Action campaign. And the reason why is just because we, instead of having one type of format, we can deliver across different pages, different type of formats, and having in mind the fact that it is an action-driven campaign. A few tips there to make sure that you're making the most out of these campaigns is make sure to include the conversion events you want to optimize toward. Also, make sure to include relevant targets CPA bidding that matches seasonality. And you can as well include different type of creative variants to make sure that actually the system has the chance to optimize toward the best performing formats. One thing to note about Video Action Campaign is that it's going to be fully released end of September, so it's going to be replacing TrueView for Action during holiday season and after. Finally, if you really want tailor a story and have personalized approach, one of the way is to use storytelling in DV360, because it's going to be a way first to bring and to reach a new user, but also moving them across the funnel from awareness to consideration and then having action. The way it works is that the user basically go through the sequence, and each impression is different, so it gives you flexibility to actually give them immersive experience with a simple workflow and control as well the frequency that's you're having. Finally, a few best practices in terms of your DV360 inventory holiday approach. So all the different format that have been presented in the previous slide are available either through DV360 or the marketplace. So the marketplace in DV360 enables you to have direct contact with the publisher and create deals, as well as having access to a broad range of inventory package that you can easily activate in your holiday campaigns. In terms of best practices, so you really want to include all different kind of formats just to make sure that you're actually following the user wherever they are browsing or present across web, mobile, tablet inventory, and also connected TV. You also want to prepare ahead of peak because, as Antje mentioned before, we know that CPM are going to rise. There are going to be a lot of competition present on the market. So locking your inventory early is a way for you to be effective, and also to make sure that you have secure inventory during the peak season. Finally, like using different kind of formats and reaching your audience, you really want to make sure that you're controlling your frequency and the number of exposure per user. And that is also the power of DV360, making sure that you can have a consolidated frequency management across different inventory you're using. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Antje to go through the timeline, best practices, and tool ahead of peaks.
Thank you, Geraldine. So I'm taking over again and guide you through a couple of more generic best practices that hopefully help you as well. As Geraldine mentioned, time and timeline is important. So what are general suggestions here? I think that the most basic one is really start early and anticipate peak before we actually come towards the event. I think some of my clients sometimes only start a few days before the event. However, as we've seen with Black Friday, but also with the early Christmas shoppers, we've seen that they start weeks, not even, or even month before, looking for Christmas gift ideas, deals, last minute gifts they might be able to buy. So starting early is key, and we prepared a little timeline here. So roughly 3 or more weeks ahead, we recommend activating more of the audience segments and anticipate that higher volume and building up your campaigns, building up the learning, so to say. And also don't forget about remarketing lists. If you want to have specific event-related remarketing lists that you want to use later on for promotions event, or if you take part in a couple of those shopping events, then you can use remarketing to kind of combine those different peaks. 2 weeks before, as mentioned in the bids and budgets section, set your seasonal adjustments. So set up your bids higher because competition will be starting too, and we need to balance out the budgets as well. So we anticipate more volume, so there probably needs to be more budget too. And a week before, very, very important, make sure you upload your creatives, make sure they are all approved and we don't run into any issues for that specific peak event. And then 2 weeks after, you can set everything back to normal. If you start another promotion, you can go right into it after that and just exchange your creatives. Then some quick best practices to meet your goals during peak. Planning is the key, and the best resource for that is your historic data, actually. So look back at the peak seasons you want to take part in, how they shaped last year. Look at the impression share and the click share. If you missed any particular traffic, then you know that you need to balance that out with more budget that is needed. And we've heard more research will be done, more sales will be done digitally, so there will be most likely more traffic coming your way. Merge budgets to top performing line items. We have mentioned that I think very shortly as well. Look at the performance of your line items and shift budgets from not so well performing line items to the really strongly performing line items. That's the best way to capture a good performance. And mobile opportunities. Black Friday and Christmas are mobile first, so people are not sitting at home; they're on the go. They're working, and here it's important that we capture them in the moment when they are looking. Geraldine introduced here a couple of formats that are more mobile friendly, so make sure you make a use of some of them. Then also online impacts offline, that relates to that moments again. So even if people might be shopping in stores, they will be researching beforehand what your store might offer, if you have any offers, any deals, what kind of product inventory you have. So make sure people can access those informations and can find them online. And finally, add more than one creative actually to your line items to take advantage of the creative optimization that we have in the tool. And as mentioned as well, make sure to upload your creatives at least 48 hours before the event takes place to make sure everything is approved. Finally, let's go through a couple of handy tools and reports you can definitely use in order to plan and prepare and conduct the peak season. First is the intelligence tool, which we highly recommend. That's featured directly in the user interface that shows you alerts and suggestions on your line items and your IOs, particularly on those important peak days, on those shopping days. Make sure you check the tool maybe a couple of times a day to make sure there are not any alerts or anything wrong with your line items and IOs. The budget reallocation suggestion is also highly recommended to particularly look at also during the peak. This is also a tool you can find directly in DV360 in the campaigns settings, which helps you improving pacing and performance by shifting budget from bad performing line items to the better performing line items. The audience and profile analysis, I think Geraldine mentioned that very, very briefly too, is a tool in the audience tab, which analyzes your first-party data and can make you suggestions on similar audiences, particularly if you look in the planning phase for expanding your audience, expanding your reach. This is a great step, a great tool to use to see what your audience compilation is built off. And then finally, the inventory availability report. After you set up your campaigns, make sure with that setup you still get that high reach you are anticipating, and make sure that you're not blocked by anything. So with these last suggestions, I hand over now to Geraldine to take us to the key learnings.
Yeah, so first, we want to ask you a little bit, what is your key takeaway from this section? So you will be able to see now on the screen a small drop-down. Feel free to let us know what is your key takeaway. Is that increasing your bid and budget to accommodate to the seasonality? Is that adopting a full funnel strategy, audience strategy? Engaging with your audience and being present across multiple environments, or start your media activity early. Hopefully it can be all of them, but you can choose if you have one specifically in mind. So with that, we are going to wrap it up and go through the key takeaways that we have for you, because we want you to leave with a few learnings of this session. And a summary is here. In terms of bid and budgets, use the power of automation in DV360 with our algorithm that is dedicated to drive action and sales, maximize conversion. Use favor goal instead of favor spend of the algorithm to make sure that you can really drive incremental actions. You really want to make sure that you are adapting your bid and budget targets to accommodate with the seasonality. In terms of audience, we have Google Audiences solution across all stages of the funnel. So feel free to use it as increment to reach additional user and adapting it with holiday season categories. We also highly recommend you to use remarketing before and after the key dates. as well as using your customer list with customer match audiences. And finally, you can increase and find incremental reach using the auto-targeting sliders in the line item level. In terms of format and creative, you can leverage a mix of format and deals type to allow more rooms for optimization. Make multiple versions of the ads with different copies to let the system optimize toward the best performing one, and tap into mobile and emerging formats to make sure that you're reaching user on additional environments and you're standing out in front of your competitors. And you can use the power of data-driven creative to deliver personalized messaging to your audience. So with that, let's move on now to the Q&A section. And I have the pleasure, we have the pleasure to have Veronica that will help us go through the questions that you have submitted before the session.
Thanks, Geraldine, and hi, everybody. I know we have only a few minutes left, but I still want to cover the most important topics that were pre-submitted, especially before the session. So the first question we will be looking at is probably one of the most important topics that is top of mind for nearly everybody at the moment, and it is peaks usually last for a short time, but DV360 learning period is around 14 days. How can the learning period cater the short peaks? So this is a super important topic, and I think Antje has covered a lot of this previously during the presentation. But I think there are a few very important topics that you need to consider. Yes, it is definitely true that the learning period can sometimes be longer than the flight period itself. Nevertheless, it definitely makes sense to take use of the algorithms also for short-time flights. If you have already used the algorithms in the past, please bear in mind that there are always learnings on the advertiser level. So when you look at this, you have learnings on the IO level, on the line item level, on the campaign level, and also on the advertiser level. So whenever you're setting up a new campaign, the learnings from the advertiser level will be considered for the new campaign as well. Of course, it will still have a learning period, and it will depend a lot on the amounts of requests you are getting into it, and a lot of the amount of conversions or clicks or whatever the measured action here is. But this can definitely be helpful if you already have a lot of campaigns and a lot of learnings on the advertiser level itself. Another thing you could bear in mind when using auto bidding for short-term flights is to use an algorithm that actually worked for similar campaigns in the past, where you have already learnings, you know that it works for your product, for your campaign. The settings are similar to something you used in the past. And this is something that then the probability will be higher that it works, especially for the short-term flight as well. Another thing you could add here is really think early about the remarketing list and create relevant lists for the peak season. You can address users and you can really collaborate and create a holistic approach for your short-term flights where the algorithms can do their work and really optimize to the most important pieces and really help to shorten the period here. What you could also look at in the long run is definitely decide about the actions and make sure that you have as many actions as possible. This includes post-click and also post-view. So make sure that you're really looking on conversions that are post-click and also post-view, and that the algorithm has as many learnings as possible. And last but not least, try to activate the algorithm on the highest possible level, which in this case would be the insertion order. So make sure that your campaign setup is as wide as possible and that you're collecting as many things as possible within one IO, where you can activate the algorithm on this level, because this will automatically shorten the learning period compared to line item level. Because of course, on IO level, you have much more learnings. The algorithm and the learning curve can increase and be better and better and better in a much shorter time than on the line item level. I hope this answers your questions. And we have another question, so please move to the next slide here. What is the best way to address pacing issues for short-term flights? I know that this is a super, super tricky topic, especially if you have like 1 or 2 or 5 day campaign and you really want to make sure that your spending here that you're going here all in and that you're really able to address it. So what can you do? In the presentation previously, we mentioned already a few tools, but there are some more. And the last choice that you have, or actually not the last choice, but a very good card to play, is definitely the chat support, who can help you quickly solve the issue. But before you do that, or simultaneously while you're reaching out to the support team, there are actually a few things that you could do by yourself. There are some tools available in the DV360 UI. For example, the intelligence panel, the troubleshooter tab or the inventory availability report. All those tools can help you to identify where the issue is coming from and how to solve for it. I think, in my opinion, the most important piece here is definitely the troubleshooter tab directly in the DV360 UI. It can be super helpful to identify pacing issues, especially on deal inventory, which is very important and present during the peak season, as you should lock your inventory earlier, as the girls mentioned before. It shows you why you're losing out on impressions and helps you identify the areas that are blocking the spend. For example, if you see that you have targeted audiences, frequency caps, all those things can be identified as issues for spend block. If you should identify that, for example, you're having a mismatch in targeting and you're targeting not the relevant audiences, what you could use here is also to utilize the auto-targeting expansion to widen the reach and make sure that you're able to address another audience, but it is still very relevant audience and very, very similar audience to the one that you actually were planning in advance. Additionally, you have the possibility to pull an inventory availability report to identify the predicted numbers of impressions that match the specific targeting criteria. If you are not able to find any issues, always feel free to reach out to our support teams. The fastest way is definitely to utilize the chat function, especially for short flights where every second and every day counts. Please make sure to troubleshoot as early as possible. And the support team will be happy to identify the technical issues that you are facing together with you. And I think we can take one more question here. So what is the best way to get the most views? And this question is a little bit tricky because we can consider different things as views. So what we are trying to focus on here is actually the differentiation between the views on display, which we see here as impressions and viewable impressions. And then on the other hand, the views and completed views on YouTube and video in general. So to optimize the campaign, you have different options. And one of the options you could use here is maximize viewable impressions. This is one of the algorithms available in DV360, and it can be super helpful for your display campaigns if you really want to run branding campaigns. It is important to utilize a lot of awareness formats if you're running those branding campaigns. Of course, the creative always plays a major role, as we learned during the presentation. Think about different device types as well that can help you increase the views and the impressions served. There are different device types like connected TV, but also a lot of inventory available on mobile devices. And both of them work really good for branding campaigns. With YouTube, you can also use different formats like huge present formats like mastheads, bumper ads, or YouTube on big connected TV screens as well. Depending on that and how you want to approach it, please make sure that you're choosing the right algorithm and that you're considering the environment where you're going to serve your ads. If you're looking for ways to optimize the video campaigns, on the other hand, we highly recommend to use YouTube in-stream, as the natural algorithm for YouTube in-stream would optimize towards completed views. With video campaigns, you have specific algorithms available that can help you optimize towards completed views, which could be, for example, the SIVA algorithm, which is optimizing toward completed view and audible, and also the little bit less strict algorithm, which is TOS10, which means 10 seconds on the screen. Those two formats can help you to optimize towards views for video campaigns in DV360. So that were the three questions that we were able to cover. I know we are already out of time, so thank you a lot for joining. We had a few questions submitted live. If we haven't answered them during the presentation, please make sure to reach out to your Google POCs, and they will be happy to help with that as well. And one more thing we would like to ask from your side is, thanks again for joining. Thanks a lot for the great questions and the collaboration here and your interest in the peak season preparations, starting them early. And please make sure to fill out the feedback survey that we are going to share in a link, so we can improve this for the next year and prepare another session or whatever is needed for this year's peak season. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.